This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I'd like to start the community development meeting, April 25th, 2023, 5:30 p.m. I'm Jason Ackerman, trustee Ackerman. We are currently still able to meet remotely because of Governor Pritzker's ongoing order, COVID order for remote meeting. And I guess roll call is necessary. We have Mike McKinnon
Present.
and Jason Ackerman here. Conflict of interest, none, I don't believe. Since we have kind of an easy meeting. Public comment, nobody signed up. Approval of minutes from March 30th, 2023.
I will make a motion to approve.
I will second. Mike, roll call. Mr. McKinnon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, Mike, all I wanted to really talk about, I just want to kind of get with your idea of where I should take this committee a little. That may be quite a broad stroke, or what you've done in the past in it a little bit. Like the zoning came up the other night, I brought that up. Is that something Frank said we could discuss that? How do you feel about that before you leave possibly leave the board?
Well, in the 11 to 12 years I've been doing it, it hasn't come through the committee, but we really haven't had a great deal of things. But I guess personally, I would like the idea to take a crack at it to at least if there is any issues that they're kind of talked a little bit about it before you get to the full board. So I
Yeah,
don't have any.
that's where I was coming from with it, yes.
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
appropriate that, maybe it runs through there. At least we've got, two or three people, depending on where the board, sits at that point in time to at least take a look at it. And it just kind of speeds things up at the full board meeting when they get to that point.
yes, and if there's any issues, we can talk about them in between. I don't want to, again, like I said in that meeting, I don't want to hold it up or anything for zoning, but if it's going to be on there, I'd like to, put it in for discussion since we have had a few more zoning
That's
changes.
actually a good problem.
Yeah,
Right?
right,
Things are starting to
right,
have some activity.
right. And that brings me, okay, so for future planning, is this, I know it doesn't say economic development, but should we, how do you go about that?
I, I would think
Trying to go further.
yeah, I don't know if we have a charter or we have a policy or whatever, but I would believe that stimulating stimulating economic activity is part of the community development committee.
Right. Which is reaching out to businesses, would it not be?
Yes, reaching out for businesses, trying to develop, expand the community, grow the community. Uh, I mean, we get, we don't have you know, we've got a limited staff. Obviously, City of Rockford has got a economic development department, and so they're geared towards that. Probably within the village, it's probably a role that the village president has taken on a greater portion and probably will
Exactly, which
continue.
is
But I think it is things. We've addressed the hotel study a couple times over the years in this committee. Uh, I think it is an appropriate thing for to run it through.
well, that's what I just wanted to talk. You're just in time for the end, probably, Mary.
Oh.
This was brief.
1 minute.
I really had, I touched on, and I'm just picking Mike's brain, and we talked, I brought up.
Mary's been around longer than me. She probably got better insight than I do on it.
Right. The zoning I brought up in the last village board meeting, whether we could, is that something we want to run through here? And Mike was on board with maybe we would like, since it was on the agenda, start running it through this committee just in case, as a second stop
And so you would envision that it would come here
from zoning.
from zoning,
and
from here,
to the
then
board.
here, then to the board, okay?
Well, and I guess a good example of that in relatively recent history is although there was a dedicated committee for when we were putting together the UDO, it kind of was part of the community development committee that was ultimately responsible for following that through. So I mean, it all just kind of makes sense that that's the home for it.
Yes, and the zoning board is they're everything's sped up. So I didn't want to delay, but I don't think it would be having the extra meeting, middleman.
Well, obviously, if there's ever a situation that something needed to move quickly for some particular reason and we didn't have a meeting, there's nothing to say it has to go through the committee. But where possible and where it doesn't delay important things or whatever, I think it should go through the committee.
Well, and I think the only thing with that though is that you maybe want to set it, if it's gonna be the precedent, that you at least try to make it be the precedent. And the only reason I say that is because for everybody that's sending something through zoning, it's gotta be done tomorrow in their heads.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I just don't want it to be that then this committee is always then bypassed because, well, everything's an emergency.
Well, no, I think exactly. We get it precedent, like, when we're communicating with somebody or here's the process you got to go through. Ideally, you want to get it through here and, you want to get it done in time that the community development has the opportunity to look at it. Yeah, it should, for skipping the community should be the exception, not the rule.
So when, let's say that somebody is coming, like, are you thinking maybe of, say, a pre-annexation is coming? Are you thinking that because that involves a change in zoning, that would go to zoning for them to hear the pitch of the people who want to pre-annex or annex? And then it would come to community development to discuss what they want to do to see if there are any community development concerns, and then set a public hearing on the zoning? Because we have to have a public hearing on the change in zoning. And so I'm just trying to think logistically of how that's going to happen. Because I go to zoning, so as well. So I don't want then to go to zoning, they have their pitch and they're like, okay, let's set a public hearing on the zoning when it hasn't gone to community development.
I don't know. I'm just saying a stop before the board meeting is more what I was, something where I guess by the time you get through public hearing, that could be a stopping point. Maybe people have complained, it's gonna keep going round and round there if with a public hearing, right? Like back to zoning.
Well, you would
for
have,
changes.
if it goes to a presentation for zoning, here, this is our idea, then they typically set a public hearing on the zoning part of it. And so then after they have the public hearing on the zoning, then we have, zoning makes a recommendation to the board. Then we have a separate public hearing on the pre-annexation agreement itself, because the pre-annexation agreement is dealt with by the board, not the zoning. So maybe if when the presentation comes, what if you had a combined committee meeting? When we know that's coming up, that you have a combined zoning and public works, so the people aren't presenting it twice. Just a thought.
I didn't really think how we'd run it.
No, I
I'm
kind of
just
like
asking
that idea.
questions.
Mhm.
Yeah, we don't want to put any undue burden on the people, and then again, these things don't come up
No.
that often. So yeah, if we could coordinate a meeting where we're all listening in at the same time or whatever, that was probably not a bad idea.
I just didn't want, it was that or we put a separate agenda item on the agenda because it felt strange to me for that to be on a commit, listed under the agenda and I knew nothing.
Yeah.
Now this one I did know about and I did have a concern and I addressed it, but yes, that's all I'm going with. As far as where to put it or why I'm doing, could I help with the zoning? It's just an extra stop where in this case, I had a concern for it to vote for the board meeting, so.
Well,
Uh,
in your defense on that one, Jason, that was not how things have really happened in the past. So there was a, certainly
Okay,
that would have caught you off surprise being relatively new and normally a lot of times those things will either come up under the attorney's portion of the agenda or the village president's portion of the agenda. That's probably a first time, at least in my recall, that something like that we
Oh.
haven't been intimately involved with end up on the community development agenda.
so
Yeah,
I don't know, Frank said we'd discuss it. I thought I'd discuss it in here a little bit, but I don't know if that's his intent of when to discuss it. I'm not sure of, but
Well,
yeah.
again, it may take another couple episodes to really kind of get it all dialed in and figure it out. But yeah, I certainly agree with you. If all of a sudden it's going to be showing up at the board meeting on the community development agenda, we should have had an opportunity to at least take a look at it.
Yes,
Before the board packet.
yes.
Or just you put it on there of, something coming up through the zoning board and, maybe the president takes the lead because he is a member of the zoning board.
So the other thing I brought up was about community development being, some places I did some research, community and economic development. Is that what this has been considered? Mike felt.
I guess, tell me what you,
Well,
how
okay,
do you
if
define economic development?
if I want to reach out to a business to try to say, bring it in here. I know there's people that have talked to me that either work for the village and they do that. I know Frank does.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that is head of the community? I'm just trying to figure out
Absolutely.
what I can do with this committee.
Yeah, I mean,
Hotel-
absolutely, because, go ahead, Mike,
The
sorry.
hotel- Yeah, the hotel feasibility kind of came through the community development, and obviously, if you're going to have a developer put a hotel on there, I would consider that economic development. So it was somewhat been precedent that we've kind of had some touch on some of those things.
Sure.
Yeah, and the only reason I was asking when you said community and economic development was what you were thinking this committee had to go do. I mean, if it were a matter of, sure, reaching out to people who maybe want to pre-annex or annex or something like that, but it's certainly not expected that this community is going to go get the investors for a hotel or
Right,
something
right.
like that.
Sure. But if you're feeling real ambitious, go ahead, right?
Have at it, I mean, but yeah, that's the idea.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
I
we didn't
guess-
really have anything else or anything at all on the agenda, but I wanted to just keep discussing things. I didn't know what to do with a meeting that has nothing on the agenda, is the other thing. But
Well, I guess the other thing that we had some dialogue or whatever, if you found a level of interest to people that would like to sit down and have some further discussion on the parks.
yes, I do have the list. I need to get those phone numbers from you. I thought I could start the Park Hills Church.
Yep.
You gave me a couple names. I thought I could stop there sometime. I'm not stopping at the right time, so.
No, I'll get you the number. In fact, I did mention to Gary Brown, because I happened to see him.
Okay.
I mentioned that, to expect a communication from you. So I will send you his telephone number as well as the other gentleman whose name escapes me at the moment.
Yeah, otherwise now Frank in the board meeting under the cow meeting mentioned maybe talking about parks. So I didn't know what his intention was there, or if I should wait on a subcommittee meeting. But anyway, with some other things going on in other committees, I bet, I just held off on calling that together yet, but
No,
I
understood.
intend to.
Yeah, and I think with Frank, with the whole cow meeting, I mean, I think he's anticipating you go do whatever you want to do. I mean, as far as your committee to go explore things. Because otherwise the cow meeting's we're gonna be there all day
Yeah, right.
and all night.
Yeah, it's not even scheduled. We don't.
No, I know,
what
but
this
I
is
mean,
yet,
when it happens, but, so I certainly think that doing things in advance or saying, okay, we're gonna talk about the parks, well, this is what I know about the parks, or at least what I've been able to.
Because with just discussion with Sally Bennett and I have discussed, we kind of want to just put the money aside first. I know that may sound, but what is the intention? What do we want to do with the parks? And then come back to the money. And what kind of grants and things are out there. Like I went to the IPRA seminar for the IPRA, what is that?
Is that like Illinois Parks and Recreation
Yes,
Association or something?
Correct. And they have a grant coming up. I keep getting emails now, but you have to apply by May 16th. It's a really good grant. It can match if you have the funds. How I understood it, if you have a budget, you tell them your budget and they can match it equally.
What are the parameters though? I mean, do you have to be like a low income community? That's where we always seem to lose out.
I didn't get a bunch of information on that. I have phone numbers, contacts, but I was trying to keep up in the seminar the best I could. But yes.
That's the only thing we run into sometimes. I mean, certainly there are other grants that, they're there for the taking and.
I don't think so, if I was to guess, because this is a play on, Cunningham Recreation was a part of it. It was game time, so it was a big group. It's a big one. Now, it was a lot, who gets the grants is more to the east, but in Cook County and things, but there was some availability, and I believe Oregon, that's what they got.
Okay.
They said it's one of
Yeah,
those.
I think sometimes, the reason why I suggested, maybe the parks would be something of a part of a conversation with a cow meeting or whatever. It's like, okay, sometimes we're a little bit disjointed. I mean, we go through a big budgeting process and we set certain money aside, and then the committee goes to it, and then eventually it comes back for the board approval. Well, it seems like a potential lot of work if there's not a unanimous or near unanimous support for spending that kind of amount of money. So, part of it is when you look at some of these big projects that we had, and we've had 3 or 4 of them that we've kind of talked about, the parks was a 6-digit potential spend.
Right.
The public works had brought up, the need to, renovate some buildings and, utilize some of the hail damage or whatever. And, so now they're looking for a, $250,000 spend. And, so it's like, okay, if we get through the budget, does that mean the budget passes? That means there's support for this? Or, do we need to, really hash out that we're all in a relative agreement on some of these big dollar amounts before we spend a whole lot of time on something and then find out there's not a lot of support for it? So
Sure.
that's kind of where I get a little tied up on there, because I just kind of got blindsided when all of a sudden we see the amounts of what this the parks are going to be, and it's like, okay, is that what we really want to do with that amount of money? And yeah, obviously if we've got hazardous playground equipment, we can't allow that to stay. We got to do something with it. But it just, again, in some of those areas, none of us have a lot of personal experience in those areas. And do you just accept what some of these bids are, or how do we find out whether there's better opportunities or grants that they can help us out a little bit? And like Mary indicated, it's we haven't been very successful in getting some of these grants because we're considered by some too wealthy of a municipality.
Yeah, and back to Mary, I had an email I had sent Frank, just a question about the Oregon Park. That reminded me. So what it is, I got to go make sure of this in Oregon, but how I understood it in this seminar, you become, with this grant, an interactive national demonstration site. So they have a QR code that people can scan with their phones, and somehow it's tied into the state, and they answer questions that, how far away did you come from? What are the age groups, you brought to this? So that's what this was. That's what the IPRA is doing, is and why I think the grant was, so large. They're using it for data as well.
Okay.
It was interesting, something to consider, especially if Oregon was able to get it, I thought, but we'll see if I'm right on that. That's what I have Doug, how do you say that, Kelly? Overbreckling from Cunningham. He's in contact with me, and I gotta get with him on that. But he, they wanted me to apply already, and I just don't see that happening before the May meeting or before the May deadline. But they do it every year or more, I believe.
Yeah, I think they,
This grant.
a couple times a year.
Couple times a year, yeah. Anyway, something to consider. They gave me a lot of books for different things to do with the parks too. There's so much more with than you'd even think about with the kids over there. Disability, kids with disabilities, adult parks, fitness parks. That might be, that's something I thought of for maybe over there on the Willingham area there, that park that's not doing anything, because it's right on the path. But all things to just discuss in a committee like that.
And now, obviously, this committee in the past has been very involved in the 4th of July. I know, at least in more recent years, because they don't have that 4th of July committee anymore, that it's been basically the fireworks. But, I don't know if there'd ever be a festival returned or
Sure.
whatever, but it's just, takes a lot of people, and we just don't have a lot of people that want to do it.
Volunteers are hard to come by. So I guess that maybe covers new business as well there, Mike. Do you have anything else?
No, I've got nothing new on my mind at the moment.
Okay, nothing to take forward to the board. No executive session, so I'll get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second. Roll call, Mike, Mr. McKinnon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Thanks, Mike. Just give me those phone numbers.
Yes,
When you can.
I'll do it. I'll do it right now. I'll send them over to you.
Thank you.
Okay, have a
Well,
good
that's one of the shortest meetings. Huh.
Yeah.
Well, we're still trying to figure out where we're at and where we're going.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye, you too, Mike. And too, Jason, I think it's important